Welcome to Holistic Dog Behavior, the podcast, where we explore the science, emotions, and stories behind dog behavior. I'm Megan, a certified dog behavior consultant.
And I'm Bridget, Megan's twin sister. We're here to make understanding your dog easier and more accessible.
Join us as we break down complex topics and share practical insights to help you and your dog thrive every step of the way. Before we dive in, a quick note. The information we share on this podcast is meant to be educational and empowering, but it's not a substitute for professional advice tailored to your dog's specific needs. Always consult with a qualified behavior professional or veterinarian if you're dealing with serious behavior or medical concerns. Dogs are individuals, and every journey is unique, just like yours. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Holistic Dog Behavior, the podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and I'm so glad you're here. In today's episode, we're covering some really powerful tools to help your dog feel more comfortable and confident in the world around them. We're going to dive right into counterconditioning, what it is, how it works, and how to use it alongside desensitization, which we talked about in our last episode. We'll also chat about what a marker is in dog training, and nope, it's not the kind you draw with, and how it can help make communication clearer and more effective. And finally, I'll share a simple game you can play with your dog to help them practice seeing triggers while staying calm. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and let's get into it. Counterconditioning is essentially pairing something your dog likes with the thing that they don't like or with the thing that causes them stress. And so now, and counterconditioning can work without desensitization, but they really work way better in parallel using them together. So doing desensitization and counterconditioning at the same time. So going back to the example of you have your dog on one side of a field and there's a dog on the opposite end of the field, and your dog doesn't like other dogs or is fearful or stressed or displays reactive or aggressive behaviors towards other dogs. What it looks like to do counterconditioning, I'm not going to do both yet. What it looks like to do counterconditioning only in that scenario is no matter like what distance you're at with your dog, and I do not recommend doing it this way. It's just like, this is what it would look like if you only did counterconditioning, is kind of no matter where your dog is, if they see the trigger, you give them treats. That's all counterconditioning is. It will not work if you're too close or if it's too intense or if the timing is too long for your dog. Mm-hmm. It can still benefit your dog. Like if you have an oh shit moment and like you turn the corner on a walk and there's another dog smack in front of your face and you shove a bunch of treats in your dog's face, that's classical conditioning at work. And that still can do a little bit of something for your dog in their head. But it is not going to be as effective as utilizing desensitization and counterconditioning together. Mm-hmm. So together, what they look like is that same example. You and your dog are on one side of a field. The other, that other dog is on the other side of the field. You're at a distance that your dog can handle seeing the other dog without getting stressed. And every time they notice the dog, they get a treat. Mm-hmm. That's how you pair the two of them together. That's a really simple example. There's a lot of nuance to that depending on what's happening, but that's like generally like what is happening overall. And it can be super beneficial to utilize those two things together because you're keeping your dog from getting stressed and you're pairing it with something they really like. And so it literally starts to change their brain pathway. And they stop because you're not stressing them out, because you're doing it as a desensitization exercise. They're not running down that pathway every time they see another dog. Mm-hmm. They're not flowing through that stress cycle anymore because you're doing it as in a desensitization way. So you're never stressing them out. So that stress is never being triggered, and that brain pathway isn't as strong anymore.
Okay, can I try and repeat what I'm hearing? I feel like I'm confused. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if I explain it very well. So this is great.
No, I think you have. Okay. So what you're saying is when you work with desensitization and counterconditioning in parallel together in a training session, for example, where your dog is on a field, you're with your dog on a field, and a stranger and their dog are far down the field, for example, or maybe like you set up a mock training session where like your friend is like all the way down the other end of the
usually
field
that's
with
what we'll
their
do.
dog.
Yeah.
So to help you out because they're the best, that's awesome.
Mhm.
So you and your dog are on one end, your friend and their dog are on the other. And in order for it to be desensitization and counter conditioning training at the same time, you have to take into account the 3Ds, and you have to make sure like that it isn't too stressful for your dog. Otherwise, you're really just classical conditioning.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Taking the 3Ds into consideration is like the first step in desensitization.
Okay.
So they're like, yeah, like one enables the other. So like the 3Ds enable desensitization to happen, because as long as you're paying attention to your dog's 3Ds, they're not getting stressed. And your
Okay.
dog, you're not doing desensitization if your dog is stressed.
And so that's the desensitization part. And then the counter conditioning part is literally waiting for your dog to be in a state of non-stress while being able to acknowledge and look towards their trigger without getting stressed. You reward them.
Yeah, that's a little more complicated actually than what counter
Oh,
conditioning is at its
okay.
core. Counter conditioning is literally just, it has nothing to do with like the stress side of it,
Okay.
really.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about like what is counter conditioning is just pairing the trigger with a treat. And it doesn't even have to do with like, it doesn't necessarily mean that the dog sees the trigger. They just have to like notice it in some capacity.
Okay.
So and I'm doing this with like weird motion around my head because I'm like, sometimes they'll flick their ear back, or like sometimes they'll just like sort of turn their head a little bit.
Yeah.
And that alert can be part of the counter conditioning, like it can be an important part of the counter conditioning. You can technically counter condition things if your dog doesn't overtly notice them either. It's just easier for people to know that they're doing counter conditioning if they wait for their dog to notice the thing.
Yeah, right.
And so, but counter conditioning at its core, when it's just by itself, is just the thing appears, give your dog treats.
Right. Okay. So
And
yeah,
give your dog treats as long as that thing is there.
Okay.
Pretty much. And then stop giving treats as soon as it leaves.
And then you're saying, but it's more effective if you can do both at the same time.
Yes, yeah. And it's funny because I don't actually necessarily, sometimes I mean literally at the same time. And then sometimes I mean you're doing desensitization for part of your training session or as a separate training session, and then you're doing counter conditioning as a separate training session, or you're doing desensitization and then you're bringing that with you into your counter conditioning session. And so like a really quick example of that is dogs who have sound sensitivities to like thunder and stuff. Well, an easy one is actually knocking on the door. And so first you want to desensitize it, because if you don't desensitize that sound first, counter conditioning is not really going to do anything.
Okay.
Because your dog, every time they hear the knocking, they're going to get stressed.
Yeah.
If it's at the same volume that it normally is. But if we can lower the volume, so like you record the knocking sound or you find a knocking sound on YouTube and you put the volume at like literally 1 above 0 and you play that for your dog and they don't react, that's the beginning of your desensitization.
Yes.
If they react to that immediately, you can begin to counter condition right away to try to help them out of that reaction. Because I mean, you can't do anything less than 1 above 0 volume. So like, we're going to try our best to work with the dog in front of us with that knowledge and the tools we have. So in that particular case, if your dog does start to react, even though it's at like the tiniest volume ever, then you bring counter conditioning in right away. But if your dog can handle the
Pow.
desensitization,
I love that.
yeah. I don't even know what my hand motions mean, honestly. I went over this last time too, but I just use my hands all the time. I don't know. I think it's emphasis.
Yeah.
People,
Oh yeah, definitely. No, it's awesome.
yeah.
And I like when people talk with their hands. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, that makes a lot more sense. I don't
Wait,
know
wait.
why I was
One
oh,
more part of it is
okay.
you if you can do the desensitization a little bit, especially with sound sensitivities, before you bring in the counter conditioning, that can help too. Or desensitizing your dog to like a sound that also has a visual, like a dog barking, or even like the like we were talking about the UPS truck. Like you can see that truck too. And so when there's lots of different things happening with a certain trigger, you can desensitize certain parts of the trigger before you start to counter condition it, as a whole sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah, it does make sense. I don't know why I was having such a struggle like picturing the field example for some reason.
Okay, yeah. And
Um
that's probably me too. Like I have that right in my head. I can
yeah,
see
like
it.
you know how to do that. You've done that a lot and
Yeah.
like I just haven't
But this
been
is where it's really helpful for us to do this together because I don't know if people get what I'm talking about.
No, I'm sure people who like have dealt with that kind of scenario are like Bridget, like hello.
Yeah.
But of course, and I think I'll have to start really paying attention to that because our dog Hazel, she's so tiny, but she is like I think has a little bit of reactivity towards other like dogs. And I think she's just tiny and like nervous. And so desensitizing and also like Remy with cats. We've talked about this
Yeah.
on the podcast. Like Remy flips, like she flips out when she sees a cat.
Yeah.
It's like she is like very mellow dog. And like I never have seen her like that. And it's so funny. Like,
Yeah.
it's fun. It's not good,
It
probably, but
and with her, that's not fear based
yeah.
like reactivity or reactions. That's more like over arousal, like
Yeah.
what is that?
Exactly. Yeah. She's
Oh
like,
my
oh
God.
my God.
Yeah. Yep.
She's
Yeah.
so
And that's
pumped.
we'll get more into like the difference between like fear-based reactions and like over arousal-based reactions later on in another episode because that's a really interesting topic as well.
Cool. Well, anyways, I do think the other examples you've provided make a lot of sense. And and exactly, it's like the door knocking one is similar sort of to how with the separation anxiety, we had to desensitize a lot of different noises for Remy. It was just in a different way. Like she's not reacting to them with a barking, lunging, or anything like that. She's reacting to with like she can't settle then, and then if we leave her and she's not settled, she's like screaming, crying, howling sorrowfully by herself, and it's like heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 All right. Let's take another break real quick and then we'll get into the last two topics. The final topic will actually be pretty fast.
Awesome.
But this third one, which we're going to talk about marker words, is going to be fun.
Cool. I'll probably prolong it.
No, it's cool. It'll be great because I think it helps people understand the concept better, really. And this is the next two things are things that people can actually do.
Yeah, fun.
I mean, they can do desensitization
Homework.
and counter conditioning. Yeah, they can do it all. But I mean, even with these next two things, having the supervision or like the guidance of a certified dog behavior consultant is best.
Yeah,
because there are so many nuanced things to these techniques.
Yeah, and every dog is different, as we like to say. So make sure
every dog is different. Every situation is different.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited to end with the game.
Yeah.
All right, stay with us. Okay, let's finish out this episode.
All right, so we're going to jump right into what a marker is in dog training. So you use this in all dog training. This is not like a behavior specific thing. So we're going to talk about what it is and how to use it basically. So a marker is a like consistent clear signal that we use in dog training to tell a dog that they've done something that we like, and that a reward is coming. And so it's basically like taking a when we use the marker, it's like taking a snapshot of the exact moment that the dog gets it right. Um, like saying like, "Yep, that's it. That's what I love." Um, so it can be a word or a sound. I use marker words most of the time, so that's going to be a really short, succinct word. That's like yes or good. Um, I prefer yes because a lot of people say like good girl or good boy after their dog does something. And that is not a marker word. Like when you say it after the thing, it's not a marker word.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not marking the actual behavior that they did. And so, but what we want to do, oh, sorry, that you can have marker words and then you can have like marker sounds. A clicker is a very typical one that's used in dog training. A whistle is also one, like they use that in dolphin training or like marine mammal training.
Mm.
Um, but a clicker, sometimes people call shock collar remotes clickers. That is not what I'm talking about.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah. I hate that.
Mm.
So, but a clicker, it's a little like plastic device that just has like a punch hole. And you just like punch the button and it
Mm-hmm.
just makes a snapping sound. It's not electrical at all. There's no like batteries or anything. It's literally just like a tiny, it's like they're like this big.
Yeah, and it also like is not meant to go on your dog. It's just like
No,
the
it's you
human
hold it.
holds it.
Yeah, it's like you get a little hair tie and attach it to a hair tie and use it in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So you use it the same way you use a marker word, where you click when they do the thing that you like. And then you always follow it with a reward. You always follow your marker, no matter what it is, with a reward. And that's going to be anything that your dog finds rewarding. So treats, toys, praise, all that kind of stuff. You got to figure out what your dog likes. Remember from our first couple episodes, I can't remember which one we talked about that in. So using a marker word essentially helps to bridge the gap between the moment the dog performs the behavior that you like and when they actually are going to receive the reward. Basically, you want to always like a marker word is a just like a really awesome communication tool to use with your dog because um you can't we are as humans are not fast enough to give our dog a treat while they're actually doing the behaviors we like. We're just
Right.
not. And that would be like really awkward and weird. Like your dog would be like, what the heck is in my face all of a sudden? So Karen Pryor really like she started with marine mammals. I believe she started it with marine mammals. I'm not 100% sure, but I think she has this really great example of where like with like a extremely heavy marine mammal that you're trying to tell to like swim through a hoop or like jump through a hoop, um you're not gonna like this is also a really good example of like why you don't need to force animals to do stuff to get
Mm-hmm.
them to learn things. Because you can't freaking force a like I don't know how much stuff weighs. I'm just gonna throw out 2 tons. Probably not right. But you can't force a giant animal like that to do something.
Yeah.
So it's a really great example of like this is how positive reinforcement works. And this is a really great example. It's like a great example of like you don't need to force things or use pain or punishment or things like that. And a great like visual is like how do you can't give a dolphin a treat the instant they go through a hoop in the middle of a pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? So she was like, so you teach them that this sound, when I click, this sound means you're about to get a treat. And it means that you did something I really like. And so you click while the dolphin's going through the hoop, and
Mm-hmm.
then the dolphin knows to come back and get the treat. And then they are more likely to do it again and
And
again
then,
and again.
and like in that instance, do you think like she probably started with like being just like being close to the dolphin in the pool and like clicking and rewarding, like to get that
That's called
association.
yes, you have to build the association before you can use it. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, any marker in
Mhm.
general that you want to use, you have to build the association before you can actually use it to tell your dog that they
Yeah.
did something you like.
Mhm.
And that's called like, or some trainers call it loading the marker.
Mm.
And it's the way I do this is literally just, yeah, like I stand next to the dog and I say yes and give them a treat. And I say yes and I give them a treat for doing nothing. They don't have to do anything when
Mhm.
they're learning to associate it. It's again straight up classical conditioning.
Mhm.
You just yes, treat, yes, treat. And you do that with a clicker. Click, treat, click, treat, click, treat. And you do that like 20 or 30 times.
Mhm.
Eventually, the dog is going to make that association. And then, like, this miraculous thing happens where they start to look up at you, and then you can click them looking up at you. And that's how you start to transition it from this just means you get a treat to you do this thing, that click gets you the treat. And
Mhm.
it's really interesting because we could get really into the weeds here. The there's such things as like primary and secondary reinforcers, and at first the food is the primary reinforcer, right? But eventually what starts to happen is the clicker morphs into a primary reinforcer, because the association becomes so strong that the dog is like, okay, I want that click, how do I get that click? Because they're
Mhm.
like, their brain is like, every time I hear that click I get a treat. But
Mhm.
over time sometimes they don't even need the treat, they're just like, yes, I got the click. That's
Mhm.
not typical. Like you really need to always give the reward. But a lot of times they start to like really want to figure out how do I get that marker to
Mhm.
happen. And that's when you get dogs that are like, I'm gonna just throw all my behaviors at you to try and get the treat. That's what Remy does.
That's what Remy does. Well, she's like just a food nut. She's a little food
Yeah.
nut. But yeah, I was just thinking about her because when she hears our marker word, her head just whips around, you know? She's like,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
What?
hmm Yeah. That's actually a really easy way I like to build recall for dogs too.
Mm-hmm.
Is you almost teach it as a marker word separate from your normal marker word,
Yeah.
but you pick a word with the intent of like it's going to be a cue. Um, but you essentially like you want that super strong association, and then you start teaching the dog to come back towards you,
Mm-hmm.
which we can go into that in another time. But yeah, it's really powerful. Like they can make a really strong association with it, and then you utilize it in all of your training. So I think that's a great segue into the game that we're
Yeah.
gonna talk about. So because you need a marker word, and for it to be successful you need to utilize desensitization and counter conditioning at the same time. Leo
Nice.
Bart.
Yeah. I can hear him.
All right, I think he's good. So yeah, I'm just gonna say that one more time just in case. So to play this game, we need all the things we talked about. We need a marker word, and we need to utilize counter conditioning and desensitization effectively for the game to begin helping our dogs create a new association with their triggers. So we're gonna I'm gonna talk about the game called Look at That. If you know anything about dog behavior, you're probably like, oh my God, Megan, I've already heard of this. But some people haven't, and it's really powerful.
I don't
So
think that I have. I don't even think I have, which is weird.
yeah, you haven't really needed it with Remy
Mm-hmm.
yet. For anything. I mean, we could potentially use it for like her stuff with cats and things, but there's like a nuanced way to use it with dogs who have over arousal versus like
Mm.
general like stress and fear
Okay.
around their triggers. So we're talking mainly about dogs who are like fearful aggressive, fearful reactive, and like anxiety based things. So the Look at That game, it's also what is the word, they shorten it to LAT, look at that. um and it was I believe developed by a woman named Leslie McDevitt. She has like a bunch of cool games for dogs, and but a lot of other trainers use it in like slightly different capacities. Um, and so what that game is, it's if we go back to that same example of there's a dog on the other side of the field and you and your dog are on the opposite side of the field. Um, we still need to be a distance away where your dog is not stressed, but they are aware that the other dog is there. That's the desensitization piece of the puzzle. The marker word then comes in. So once your dog already knows your marker word, you don't want to do this game if your dog doesn't have a marker word. When to use the marker word here is you watch your dog and you wait until they actually do look at the trigger. And as soon as you notice that they look at the trigger or acknowledge it pretty much in any way. So like if they do an ear flick or like they slightly, like they don't turn their full head, but their eyes go that way, you mark it with your marker, whether that's a word or a clicker or whatever. And then the counter conditioning comes in. You give them a reward after you've used the marker. So basically what that looks like is you're out in a field, your dog sees a trigger, you say yes, give them a treat. That is essentially the look at that game. You're not saying anything to them. You're not saying, look at that. No. Sometimes you can utilize that kind of thing later on with labeling work that we do in behavior modification. But with the look at that game, you don't really say anything to your dog. You just kind of wait until they notice it. And then you say yes, and you give them a treat. And again, you got to be in at a distance or a duration or an intensity where your dog is not stressed for this to be effective. But that's how they all kind of come together.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely know this game and have used it many times. I just didn't know that's what it was called.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Because sometimes I actually don't tell people what it's called because then they start saying, look at that to their dog. And I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. I'm explaining it terribly. I'm sorry.
No. I can see where that would happen, even if you explain it well, which you just did.
It can be confusing. Yeah, it can be confusing. Yeah.
I like that though. That is what we do with Remy and her little rabbits and cats. We have a sunroom where there's like windows on 2 walls that go down to the floor. So Remy can see just like, wow, like so much. She, it's like a dog's paradise. She can just like see everything in the yard. And yeah, the problem with that is if a lot of neighborhood cats walk by, or we have so many rabbits in like the spring and summer, and she just like, I don't know, it's just hyper arousal, or like she's just like, I want to like, I'm gonna. Well,
she's a terrier. She's a terrier, so terriers have the genetics to chase stuff.
Yeah, she really wants to chase the rabbits for sure. I mean, she does sometimes when we're outside, but even we've gotten to the point with this game, I think, where we started it inside, where I would just wait for her to look at me, and then I would say yes, and she'd come get the treat, and then I'd let her go back and look, and sometimes she would bark still, and I would just let her do it, and then she'd look at me and come, and I'd say yes, and then she'd come back and get the treat, and then it has turned into like now when she like sees a cat or a rabbit outside, she'll still bark, but then she'll kind of remember like, oh yeah, wait, I get a treat. I'm gonna like go to mom.
Yeah, so that is such a perfect segue into like the second half of the look at that game, which we can call look back, because over time, the more repetitions you do, the more the association becomes strong with your dog that when I see this thing, I get a treat from mom or dad or whoever. And so then when there comes a time, and it just depends on the dog, they'll start showing it to you though, kind of like what Remy did. They just sort of start doing it all of a sudden, where they have associated it, seeing the trigger, with getting that treat from you, and they start to look back at you, or they start to go find you when they see the thing. If you're not right next to them or whatnot. But when you're in a training session, you'll eventually start to see your dog looks back at you before you even are able to say the marker word. They see the thing and they're like, oh my God, give me the treat. And that is really what we're trying to do with behavior modification in that context with look at that game, is change the trigger from a negative association that can cause a reaction in your dog to a cue for your dog to look at you.
That's amazing. Love that.
Yeah, it's like that's one of my like all-time favorite things to work on with people. because it's so fascinating and you can see it. You can immediately see it when they start to look back at you and you're like, there it is. There it is. And then you begin to mark and reward the looking back at you after they've looked at the trigger. And then, so then you start rewarding the actual behavior of looking back instead of the looking at the trigger. And you have to like, sort of like, depending on the 3Ds, depending on your dog, you have to kind of flip back and forth between those things throughout the training process. And that's again where like it helps to have a certified dog behavior consultant to tell you like when you need to do those things. When you have to transition between something you already taught your dog and something new that they're learning, and then go back to the thing they already know because something's changed. But yeah, that one it's just super powerful and super useful. And it's really cool because it also builds more connection with you and your dog.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that exact word, which is it builds so much connection. And the fact that you can see it is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be really powerful for the clients or like for owners to see it because a lot of behavior work is so boring. And it should be fucking boring for you and your dog. Otherwise, they're stressed. Otherwise, there's some component of stress probably happening.
Right.
So it should look really boring, but that can also be like really discouraging because you're not necessarily always seeing like true, like actual behaviors. A lot of times you're just sometimes people do feel really good about like, oh, my dog wasn't able to just lay here and relax when another dog was this close, like sometimes that kind of training can be really empowering too, but it's really empowering to see the actual, like your dog do something that is really awesome and really cool and gives you that feeling of connection. And that look back can really do that. So cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I have like sort of a next step after even that, maybe in terms of just what we went through with her seeing the rabbits and stuff in the sunroom. So we started with the look at that game. Then she started being able to just look at us before we even said the marker word, and like we just kept moving with that. And it's gotten to the point where like this summer we don't have a fully fenced in yard, so she'll be on like a long leash out there with us, and she'll do it on the long leash.
Wow. And that's huge because that's also where the 3Ds come in, because if she's far away from you, that makes it a more difficult, distracting thing for her to do.
But she's not usually super far.
Part
of her separation.
She's
but even like
right there, even like 10 feet away is different than like doing a training session where you're right next to each other.
Yeah. And what's kind of interesting is like we got a new right outside our sunroom, we have like a little portion of yard that we put a small fence around for both of the dogs. But then our wider yard is just kind of like open air. It's like open to our driveway and stuff. So eventually we'll close that off. But so now they're like, what's new since summer is that there is a little fence right outside so they can go out and pee without us having to put their leash and harness on. And Remy hasn't really noticed many bunny rabbits or cats, but I'm curious to see if that change in the environment like has us have to kind of like go back a little bit and like retrain it. So keep you posted on that.
Yeah, it's possible. And that's the thing, is like you just kind of like have to roll with it when it happens, but it's going to be so much easier because she already has that foundation.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks to you for helping us with all of that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You guys are so good. You're such good owners. She's such a good dog.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's just recap really quick. We talked about desensitization, counterconditioning, markers, and the look at that game. And bonus, the look back portion of the look at that game. So we're gonna talk about lots more stuff coming up in the next few episodes. And anything else to add?
I think that's it. Yeah. I think this was a really fun one, and I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, it was so fun to talk about. So
Yeah.
hopefully you find it helpful, at least in some capacity. And remember, all dogs are individuals. So it's always likely that you'll need some tweaks to these techniques. So always reach out to a certified dog behavior consultant. Doesn't have to be me. Just make sure you get some help or guidance when you need it.
Yeah, we're just here to share kind of broad knowledge on the topic so that yeah, we can help point people in the right direction and give it like some overview. So
Yeah,
think
because it's the concepts are like not well known. They're not
hmm
mainstream. So
hmm
got to get them out there.
yeah,
Mhm,
awesome.
mhm.
I think that's a
All
great
right.
place to wrap it up. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Music for Holistic Dog Behavior, the podcast by Mark Shevlin. Art and design by Studio HMS. Produced by Holistic Dog Behavior.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. To learn more, follow us on social media at Holistic Dog Behavior or go to holisticdogbehavior.com.